capacity to sustain industry, which is the cause of the present failure. Why then might we wade through Mr. Ryan's classic appeal? Only because it so thoroughly represents no more than a handful of attempts to disprove mathematically perfected economy, and you can't possibly know better otherwise. Enjoy. End of introductory remarks. So now I give the account of this. On Sunday, the 3rd of November, 2002, of Kent State University's Capital Ownership Group's virtual think tank pages, William B. Ryan posts an entire former People for Mathematically Perfected Economy newsletter, with the title of which was Leaders Fit for Fools. It pertained to George Bush. With the following introductory remarks against the proposition that a currency subject to interest inherently multiplies debt in proportion to a circulation. So this is William B. Ryan's words here now. I've been on this fellow's mailing list for some time. He's talking about me. He is another crank I enjoy reading, if only for the humor. This is a, college guy that fraternizes with college professors, so enjoy his style of communication. And to me, I think it's it's blasphemous toward his peers. I mean, I wouldn't want this guy firing off around me. But anyway, I've been on this fellow's mailing list for some time. He says he's another crank I enjoy reading, if only for the humor. To me, it's more fun than going to the zoo and looking at the funny animals. His mathematics results in the profound conclusion that 2 + 2 = 5. So he says. So he quotes me there. And he thinks this is funny. He quotes me. This is in quotes. In any system where this is Mike Montagne speaking again. Then the part that he's quoted, he doesn't say exactly where he got it from. But anyway, it's all over my work. It's the same thing. And I don't dispute it, of course. In any system where the currency is loaned into circulation as a debt subject to interest, it is mathematically impossible to maintain a vital circulation without debt increasing in proportion to that circulation until the cost of debt consume the entire circulation and commerce itself can no longer be afforded. Well, he took it out of context a little bit because he put an ellipsis in the front of it. So he dropped the first part of the sentence or paragraph in which I explained why it was mathematically impossible. But there's enough there that any reasonable, responsible person would be caused to evaluate this. Well, maybe there's something to that proposition. What would it be? Okay. So, but Ryan then concludes in his own words, this is simply not true. Okay. So in his subsequent post to himself, this isn't even a dialogue with somebody else. In his subsequent post to himself, and I provide a link to it, William B. Ryan presumes, and that is oh shoot, I can't read it off the bottom of the window right now. It's out of the page, so sorry. In his subsequent post to himself, William B. Ryan presumes to disprove that this one problem of many solved by mathematically perfected economy even exists. I leave it to the reader to deduce why he does not distinguish the problem from mathematically perfected economy itself, particularly as many readers will assume incorrectly that the relevance of the one problem and the solution of many others are equivalent, even if Mr. Ryan actually fails to disprove inherent irreversible multiplication of debt by interest. Of course, neither I nor Jefferson, sidebar, nor anyone else I am aware of ever put the problem in the terms Mr. Ryan may purposely obfuscate. In other words, he's trying to make it sound like we claim the things that he characterizes us with, which are entirely his own invention, a little story about how a guy can't figure out how to do change at a motel, which I'm about to tell you. Okay. Ryan's intended points are enumerated for further discussion. Anyway, so his first claim is, the typical way the cranks put it is this: gotta pepper all this stuff with ad hominem. If banks loan 10, where does the money come from to repay 11? Well, as I read that, I think, oh, well, you've got all my plagiarists, you've got all these people trying to repeat what I've explained so carefully, and it's got to be said just in these terms. And, just because somebody doesn't say it right doesn't mean it's not true, you know. But so evidently somebody may have come up with this, but I've been told actually this is Ryan's invention. So anyway, the difference between 11 and 10 being presumably interest. So anyway, he's throwing at you an arbitrary. Well, it's not an arbitrary question. It's a hypothetical question. The typical way the cranks put it is this: if banks loan 10, where does the money come from to pay 11? In other words, the 10 is the principal, the 11 is the principal and interest. The difference between 11 and 10 being presumably interest, he says. The question carries with it a number of implied false assumptions. The question itself is false. I love that one. He says the question itself is false. How can a question be false? It begs the wrong answer. Oh, okay. So it begs the wrong answer. The mistake is to try to answer it, which he does, rather than questioning the question itself. This is Kent State University, okay? The Capital Ownership Group, okay? The following story falls within the same category of logical fallacies, he continues. 3 men go into a motel. The man behind the desk said the room is $30, so each man paid $10. Of course, it's gone up quite a bit since this story here, you notice, you know. So each man paid $10 and went to the room. Okay. A while later, the man behind the desk realized the room was only $25, so he sent the bellboy to the room with $5. On the way, the bellboy couldn't figure out how to split the $5 evenly between the 3 gentlemen. How does this have to do with mathematically perfected economy, you ought to be asking. So he gave each man $1 and kept the other $2 for himself. Okay. This meant the 3 men each paid $9 for the room, which is a total of $27. Add the $2 the bellboy kept equals $29. Where's the other $1? Okay. Now, as if this explains this, how you could possibly maintain a vital circulation without further borrowing. He hasn't even gone there, you know. So he says, where's the other $1? The predicate to the question should have been subtract the $2 the bellboy kept equals $25. Where are the $25? Answer, the motel has it. You know, he's probably lost you by now. You have to read this a little bit slowly because, you know, by the time you get here, you know this guy isn't even worth reading. As to the 10 can't replay 11 fallacy, he continues, the answer is similar. The flux, this is the part to listen to, the whole thing comes down to this. The flux representing the flow of loans is the very same money as the reflux in payment of principal plus interest. I haven't even changed the punctuation on this. The reflux is the flux delayed in time, as if that means something. Austrian, so-called preposterous Austrian economics guys claim this money time thing all the time, as if, you know, they try to fluster you, as if, you know, they're saying something and they can't even, you know, this doesn't mean anything, you know. It's the flux delayed in time. Well, you know, we know you pay later. Flux and reflux. 10 can't repay 11 falsely implies that the interest is something extraneous to the loans. Oh, it isn't? You mean, well, as Ellen Hodgson Brown probably read this, and that might be the very point where she got the idea, well, you need to loan the interest in with the principal then. He was wrong here, but that's how you would fix it. You know, by golly. Anyway, so 10 can't repay 11 falsely implies that the interest is something extraneous to loans and must be extracted from outside the lending process. Well, that's the question. He doesn't say how it can be. In reality, he says, nonetheless, 10 is repaying 10. Is that a fact? And it is empirical. He says, and it is empirically verifiable. Here's how. At zero interest, none of the reflux is allocated to interest. All of it is allocated to principal. At a rate of interest X, X is allocated to interest, and the reflux, this is ridiculous, X is allocated to principal. It is entirely a matter of counting in the books of lenders and borrowers. When plotted on the same graph against time, the flux and reflux curves are parallel regardless of the rate of interest. Well, this is the purposed deceptions of a college professor who's attempting to to speak so far above our heads that we can't possibly, unravel all this. Well, I'm sorry, this was second grade math to me, and this is child's play. This is just so preposterous. It's stupid, and I use Ryan's own words to disprove himself. But you'll probably be able to follow along with this part. This is me replying. And, of course, Ryan has never answered back. So Mr. Ryan begins with ad hominems, and all this is footnoted, so it points back to the different parts, and a surreal allegation, too, which he alleges represents the thesis of a selected, truncated quote, which he merely asserts is not true. It's true. He didn't disprove the quote. He went on to say that his example equates to it somehow and that it somehow disproves it, but he doesn't give that, and in fact, his own words disprove himself. You didn't catch them, but I'll reveal it to you. He resumes with further ad hominem to introduce a pretended summary he wholly invents himself. He then equates his pretended summary to an irrelevant story which he asserts to have a similar answer to the 10 can't repay 11 fallacy, as he calls it, which he has invented. By obvious standards, bona fide refutations must apply directly to the ostensibly refuted proposition. Rather than a credible approach at disproof, Mr. Ryan's efforts take the form of disinformation. He thus introduces his disproof with remarkable analysis. Although the cited quote is a statement, he refers to its purported equivalents with such leeway as to treat them as questions. Although a question is not an assertion, he then states that the question is false, that the question begs the wrong answer, and that the mistake is to try to answer it, which he then purports to do. He then merely asserts that the following story falls within the same category of logical fallacies. Yet in the story, he simply obfuscates that we should add the $2 kept by the bellboy to the $27 ultimately paid for the room to account for the $25 originally paid out of $30, when obviously the $25 intended cost of the room plus the $2 kept by the bellboy equals the amount actually paid for the room, which is $27, and the $27 actually paid for the room plus the $3 refunded is the equation to return the original sum of $30. So that's all fixed for you, okay? So guess what? No problem answering that. So what is the problem here? Thus, the only attempted trick question is Mr. Ryan's. In the body of the ostensible disproof provided with this diatribe nonetheless, it is reasonably clear that his terms flux and reflux refer to the very process I cite, by which we can only maintain a circulation by reborrowing principal and interest paid out of the general circulation as subsequent sums of debt, which are increased so much as periodic interest. Contrary to his introductory assertions, no one misunderstands that the flux and reflux are equal if a circulation is maintained. In other words, I never said that what you pay out of it or what you borrow back into it is more than what you paid out of it. Never once. Never in my life have I ever said that. And Mr. Ryan well knows that from his visits to the zoo, because he had to cherry pick and truncate a quote to avoid 35 years of consistent explanation that A, having to reborrow principal paid out of the general circulation as new debt negates the usual assumption that we can pay down the sum of debt, and that B, having to reborrow interest paid out of the general circulation as new debt above the former sum of debt comprises the transformation of periodic interest into a greater sum of debt. Yeah, where the interest and principal that we pay out of the circulation are the same as the interest and principal that we have to borrow back into the circulation. But of course, the reborrowing of principal creates a new debt equal to the old, making it mathematically impossible to pay down the sum of debt, as I've been saying for 40 years now, and more than 40 years. And of course, what interest you reborrow because it didn't count against the former sum of debt is a new sum of debt. Okay.